Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the third episode of Self Ruqyah 101. In today's program, we will discuss about the Ruqyah process. We will talk about things like whether one needs to be a professional Raqi to do this, or do I need to be an expert at reciting the Quran? What is there in the Sunnah about Ruqyah? What is there in the Quran? Do I need to touch the person? And other several issues related to the Ruqyah process. And to give you more information about this, we have with us in the studio, once again, Sheikh Muhammad Tim Humble. Sheikh, welcome to the program.
Jazakallah khairan, it's a pleasure as always.
So in the previous program, we discussed about the things we could do Ruqyah for. So in today's episode, we would like to talk about the Ruqyah process itself. The first question that I have in my mind is, do I need to memorize a particular number of verses in order to begin the process?
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salam ala abdillahi wa rasulih nabiyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So there is no specific requirement to have memorized a certain amount. And there is no specific requirement that a person's tajweed should be, that they should be a professional reciter or something. But a person has to do their best. And the more Quran you know, the more comfortable you'll be in Ruqyah for sure. I'm not going to say if you are Hafidh of the Quran, you're going to be very comfortable because you know what you're reading, you don't have to worry about it. But it's not a condition. And so a lot of people leave off Ruqyah because they say, I'm not Hafidh, or I don't know much of the Quran. I know professional ruqa. When I say professional, I mean people who do it as every single day, who only read Al-Fatiha and Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Falaq and Qul A'udhu bi Rabbil Nas, for example. And yes, I would say the more Quran you know, the better. The more you'll be comfortable. The more tafsir you know, the better. The more you have studied Islam, you will feel also better as well, inshallah. But it's not a requirement. In terms of tajweed, then we would say in terms of tajweed, a person has to do their best. And really remember, tajweed is divided into two categories, right? There is essential tajweed, where if a person doesn't have it, they're changing the meaning of the word away from its proper meaning. And we would say, we're not going to say this person cannot do Ruqyah, but we would say this is urgent to fix. It's urgent to fix in your Salaf before your Ruqyah. If you're reading the Quran in a way where you are changing the meaning of the words, then this is definitely an urgent problem that needs to be dealt with. And then there is the voluntary and the recommended aspect of tajweed, which a person never stops, learning. I would not say that I have reached the end of that goal, subhanAllah, I read to my teacher will say, there's so many mistakes.
For everybody.
That is everybody, teachers listen to imams in the Masjid al-Nabawi and the Masjid al-Haram and say, they have a mistake in the tajweed, this is wrong here, this should be different. For this it will never stop. But a person does the best they can. La yukallifu Allahu nafsan illa wus'aha. Allah doesn't burden anybody with more than they can handle.
So what are some of the general, parts of the Quran, for example, we could recite?
So let's talk about the general process. So in the general process, we're going to start with reading the Quran as a base. This is going to be our base. So someone says, teach me Ruqyah before you start doing anything else, before we go into herbs and spices and anything, just reading the Quran to start with. Before we talk about touching or not touching, before we talk about all different sort of extra things and water and oil and things, just reading the Quran with the intention of seeking a cure from Allah for whatever is afflicting the person. That's the start. Now we can add to that, for example, the most common thing to add is blowing. And there are different ways to blow that are mentioned in the Sunnah. One is to blow with air, like that. One is to blow with a little bit of spittle, so to let it be a little bit of a moist kind of blowing, like that. That is also from the Sunnah. To blow and then to rub and touch. But on this we will come back to the issue of not that must be someone that you are permitted to touch in Islam and not someone that you're not allowed. But if we're talking about ourselves or our close family member, then, generally it will be fine. So, and touching and so on like that. But all of it, the base is what? Reciting the Quran. Add to that also the dua and the adhkar of Ruqyah. We have mentioned some in earlier episodes, and we'll come back to that as well. So if we take the base as reciting the Quran, a person has to, I have to be close to the person. Well, it can be better. It depends on the person. So if I'm reading on a lady and I'm not a mahram for her, I'm not going to be very close to her. I will typically be maybe a little closer than I am right now, but not much, because I don't want inadvertently to fall into something haram. So I'm going to keep a reasonable distance from her. But if I'm reading, for example, if I was going to read on you, then yeah, I would be probably out of just making it easier, and I would generally be closer, and I would maybe be a little bit more physical, because I would be like, but the base of it is reading the Quran. So you asked about the ayat we're going to read. So there are some ayat which are established in the Sunnah directly for Ruqyah. And there are some ayat which are established through general principles. And then there are ayat which are connected to the topic. And then there are many, many other ayat. So let's take these different categories. The first are the ayat which there is a clear evidence of using them in all Ruqyah. Surah Al-Fatiha and the Mu'awwidhat, the last 3 surahs of the Quran. This is very, very, very important.
For all types of...
For all types of affliction, for all types of issues, for medical, for anything. Because the Prophet ﷺ said about Surah Al-Fatiha, وَمَا أَدَرَاكَ أَنَّهَا رُقْيَةٌ. What made you know that it was Ruqyah? And it was used for a scorpion sting, which is a medical problem. There was someone, Surah Al-Fatiha was used for insanity. They had gone insane. And it didn't mention whether it was jinn or not. It wasn't specified, but just the person had become, mentally unstable. So Surah Al-Fatiha, the last 3 surahs of the Quran, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. There are then other things which we have general evidences for, like Ayatul Kursi, because it is the greatest of the ayat in the Quran. Like when the Prophet ﷺ, he asked one of the companions about the greatest ayah in the Quran, and he said, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa al-hayyul qayyum. These are, we have like a general understanding of it, right? Like as the greatest ayah in the Quran, we should definitely be including it in our Ruqyah. Also, it's part of Surah Al-Baqarah, and we have a specific evidence for Surah Al-Baqarah because the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ أَخْذَهَا بَرَكَةً وَتَرْكَهَا حَسْرَةً وَلَا يَسْتَطِيعُهَا الْبَطَلَةُ. That whoever takes it will be blessed, and whoever leaves it will lose, and the magicians cannot do anything against it. And that's for the whole surah. But within the surah, if you're going to select places, for sure you're going to select Ayatul Kursi because it's the greatest ayah in the Quran. So we have general evidences for that. Then we have things that are related to topics. So for example, I suspect, I don't know, and a lot of people ask, how do you know? Is it ayn? Is it jinn? I don't know to start with. I'm going to use qara'in. I'm going to use a collection of indicators, right?
Verses,
now,
you mean?
Anyone who says, not verses here, I'm going to use a collection of things which indicate. Now, a lot of people, when it comes to detecting the problem is they want a scientific test tube test. Put it, it's purple, it's sihr. And many Raqis try to give them this. Read ayah number 102 from Surah Al-Baqarah, وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينَ. And if the person starts to shake at this point, and if the person starts to blink at this point, but this is not from the Sunnah.
I think that's a very important point. I mean, this is practiced in the Maldives as well. There are scholars who give a specific verse and say, if this happens, you are afflicted.
And the problem is, it could be right. I'm not going to, and please don't misunderstand, it can be right, but it's not very reliable. And it actually causes people to make errors. What do you need to do instead? The correct way to do it is to build up a body of evidence from many things. Patient history, how they react to the Quran, different things you observe from them in their sickness, how their sickness presents itself. And you take a collection of things together, this is much more reliable. And it doesn't discount what they said, but it just makes it doesn't make it a guaranteed test. It just makes it, okay, I noticed when I read the ayat relating to magic that the person's had a reaction. That's something to keep in mind. It doesn't mean they have magic, but I will bear it in mind. I will also add the patient history. I will also look at other things and bear in mind that there are often multiple afflictions within a person. We can talk about, for example, an-nadhara, which the Prophet ﷺ mentioned, which some of the scholars, they said it's the evil eye from the jinn, or the evil eye that is followed by the jinn. So a person can have combinations of problems. Magic often comes with the jinn and the shayateen. So in this type of situation, the way you diagnose it is by building up a case history, by looking at the person, by looking at Ruqyah over a period of time, not just one session, by looking how the case develops. And with time and experience, you will get more of a result. But my question is, ultimately, if you knew the person had magic and it's not the evil eye, would you really take a huge number of different steps? Maybe some, but it will not be like you're going to stop reading the Quran and do something else. So that's to bear in mind. And then there are, of course, the whole Quran is a shifa. So whatever you read from the Quran, sometimes I read something because I believe that it will help me to have more concentration and khushu' in the recitation, because I know that this surah is a surah which I wanted to read and I wanted to think about it. And sometimes I will read that because the whole Quran is shifa, right? And this will help me to concentrate, or maybe I think there is something in there that needs, it is relevant to the patient. So there is no harm in this. I'm not discounting people who say when it's jinn possession, read this, when it's ayn, read this. But don't become so hooked on that it becomes your only thing. Because actually when you look at the sunnah, you see it's more general than that. It's very general. And then from the general, move into the specific. So we see some people, they're reading, for example, the ayah in Surah Al-Baqarah about sihr, about magic, ayah number 102. And they're not reading the mu'awwidhat because they're not leaving time. So they're not reading the ayat, which when the Prophet ﷺ had sihr on him, these were the ayat that were read upon him to break it. The surah was sent to break the magic that was done to the Prophet ﷺ. قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ الْفَلَقِ قُلْ أَعُوذُ بِرَبِّ النَّاسِ. And then the person leaves it and goes to Surah Taha and Surah Yusuf and Surah Yunus and Surah Al-A'raf and so on. There's nothing wrong with what they're reading, but just get your priorities right. Yeah, like read what is established in the Sunnah, branch out when you to different things, and then over time you'll see. For things you can then add onto that, the most important thing is to add the dua and the things the Prophet ﷺ used to say. And
what are some of the du'as
so
we
I'll
could
tell
read?
people where to find them. This I think is really beneficial. And you've heard of Fortress of the Muslim, right? Fortress of the Muslim is by an author, a sheikh who is called Sheikh Sa'id ibn Wahb al-Qahtani. The same author has another book called something like Ruqyah Supplications. This book is it's a different one from Fortress of the Muslim, but the same author. And it's quite widely available. It has many collection of du'as for Ruqyah that you can make. And you make it in the same way. So for example, أذهب البأس رب الناس اشفي وأنت الشافي لا شفاء إلا شفاؤك شفاء لا يغادر سقما. You can also blow after that. You can read on the person. And this is from what the Prophet ﷺ read in Ruqyah. What should we avoid reading? We never ever read anything which is outside of the Quran and the authentic Sunnah and that which is established in dua, like the names and attributes of Allah. And that is so we don't go out of the consensus which is reported by Imam al-Nawawi rahimahullah and others regarding Ruqyah, that we don't go outside of it. Now yes, in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, he allowed quite a wide variety of Ruqyah. And he said, أَعْرِضُ عَلَيَّ رُقَاكُمْ, show me your Ruqyah that you read. And then he gave permission for whatever didn't contain making a partner with Allah. But the danger is in our time that we've gone, people easily fall into wrong things. For example, sometimes they get told the names of shaitan. And you see the person is reading the name of shaitan over and over again and they don't realize.
And some people might think, the longer you read, the better.
Yeah, so ultimately, read from the Quran, read from what is authentically reported from the Prophet ﷺ, the names and attributes of Allah and the etiquettes of dua and so on that we have, and stay within that to be safe. To be safe. Never accept ruqyah in a strange language. Never accept ruqyah in, whispering and, the person is reading and then, start saying funny things and don't accept it because this is a sign of a magician. So it's really important. The last thing I would mention about the process is that from the things that I believe it's permissible to do, some of the scholars, they didn't hold it to be permissible, but many of the scholars, and it seems to me that the Jumhur, the majority, they held it to be permissible, and it has some general evidences for it, even though the specific evidence for it is weak, but it has some general evidences for it, is reading on water or on any pure substance, like olive oil and so on. This is very effective because it allows you to expand the method of ruqyah. So water can be used for bathing, can be used for drinking, so it can help the person internally as well. It can be used for even spraying on a person or splashing on a person if you're not going to blow on them, for example. And the olive oil can be used to rub on the skin like a moisturizer. So this can be good when a person goes to bed. Rub the olive oil on them, let them go to sleep in the morning, let them take a shower, and let them tip the water. Some people ask, am I okay to use that water in the bathroom? We asked this question to our Sheikh Adil, Hafidhahullah, and he said yes. Because even though some of the scholars, they disagreed about it, the reality is this water is not Quran. It's not the Quran. It's simply something the Quran has been recited upon. It has there is no Quran in it. It's something the Quran has been recited over. So for this reason, we don't see any harm. But if someone wants to be safe and they want to collect the water into a bucket and then tip it outside instead, we don't see this to be a problem. And some of the scholars recommended it. So start with the basic reading of the Quran, blowing, wiping, and so on. One more thing I would mention is really helpful. Sometimes what you see with regard to the jinn and the shayateen is that if a person does have a reaction, you see the reaction might be focused in a particular place. In the arm, in the hand, in the head. So here's where you can apply some, physical pressure. Now, we would not advise hitting. Yes, it's true that the scholars of the past, some of them used to hit people in ruqyah. And there is no doubt about that. But the problem with hitting is the harms outweigh the benefit. The harm is that if you don't do it properly, you end up hurting the person. You usually are breaking the law by doing it in the first place, usually. And you can actually cause really severe harm to the person and no improvement. What is very good instead is just to put some gentle pressure like a massage, blow on your hand, put some gentle pressure, read on the oil, put some gentle pressure on the person, as long as that person is someone that you are allowed to touch in Islam. Someone say, okay, I'm reading on a lady, I'm not allowed to touch her. What shall I do? Here's where you involve the mahram. Read on the mahram's hand. Say, come here, brother. Read on his hand, tell him you wipe her head. Read on his hand, tell him you can, put some pressure. The other person
can do it.
Yeah, you can do it. There is no need for me to do it. My hands are not mubarakah. They are not blessed. My hands are everyone else's hands.
It's not the hand that is doing it.
They're everyone else's hands. The barakah was in the hands of the Prophet ﷺ because Aisha, she used to read on the hands of the Prophet ﷺ. And this is very powerful because she said when one of us became sick in the family, they used to read the mu'awwidat, the last 2 or 3 surahs of the Quran, and blow and wipe on the person. And when the Prophet ﷺ became sick, Aisha, she used to read ruqyah on him. And this is a sign for the self-ruqyah in the family. She used to read on him. But she said, I didn't used to blow in my own hands. Now his wife, she can blow on her own hands. But she said because his hands had more barakah than mine. So she used to read into his hands and she used to wipe with his hands over him. But generally, this is for the Prophet ﷺ. So there's nothing wrong with reading in the mahram's hand. And no doubt in terms of barakah, this is closer in any case because you are and there are ahadith about the severity of touching a woman who is not a mahram, that it would be better for one of you to have an iron nail driven through his head than for him to touch a woman who is not a mahram. So how can a person seek a cure from Allah with something that is haram? And the Prophet ﷺ said, "Tatawu wa la tatawu bil haram." Seek a medicine, but don't seek a medicine in that which is haram. So this is really important. We advise people very strongly. And I know it's difficult when a lady becomes sick and the temptation is bring the raqi and let the raqi do. But I would say to the raqi, look, you're welcome to come, but there won't be any physical contact. You can read in the mahram's hand, and that will be sufficient for you, inshallah.
One last thing, very quickly, if you could. Will playing the Quran work, on a cassette player or something?
So playing the Quran is not ruqyah itself. We don't call it ruqyah, because ruqyah is something which is recited on the breath. It's something which is recited, like, for example, we don't call the adhan which is played on the tape, we don't call it the adhan. And it's the sound of the adhan, but we don't, it needs a niyyah, right? We can't go in the masjid with a tape player and press play, because it wouldn't be an adhan, even if the sound is heard, because the niyyah is missing, the recitation is missing.
This is done in the Maldives, in many homes. They play Surah Baqarah, for example.
Yeah, so there is nothing wrong with doing it from the point of view of assisting in ruqyah, from the point of view of listening to the Quran, because the jinn and the shayateen don't like to hear the Quran. But it's not ruqyah itself. Don't class it as ruqyah. Class it as a secondary treatment, as a bonus, but don't class it as ruqyah. So the mistake is when people play the Quran as ruqyah and say, this is my ruqyah, that's it. And not just here, but many places, people put headphones but ultimately ruqyah needs the raqi to be present, either yourself, you're reading on yourself, or on someone else, to be present with the intention that they have in their heart, with the recitation that comes on the breath. It needs that. Otherwise, we don't call it ruqyah, but we call it maybe listening to the Quran. And listening to the Quran is always beneficial.
Fine, yeah. Jazakallah khairan, Shaykh, for the wonderful information.
You're welcome anytime.
That's the end of this week's episode. In today's program, we have discussed about the Ruqyah process in detail. We hope it has been beneficial for you, and inshallah we will see you again soon with the next episode. Thank you very much for watching. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.